it was because I raised my standard. Whether it's looking at the area of my relationships, the people I relate with, the people I allow in my inner circle, the area of business, the people I interact with, the ideal client, the people I serve. Every time my life has changed and shifted, I realize each one of those moments is because I raised my standard. Now, when I look back, there are times in my life where I just made an unconscious decision to raise my standard unconsciously. And I realized my life shifted, the goals shifted, because from that moment on, it's like you begin to live a new life. Now, Tony Robbins, the celebrated father of coaching, says this: if you want to change your life, you have to raise your standards. There's no way you can talk about change, talk about living a different life, and have the same standards of relationships, same standards of the way you do things, same standards of thinking, same standards will give you the same life. The quality of your life is the quality of your standard. Whatever you have today is the standard, is what you're playing. Life gives you your standard. Life has no reason but to give you what you request of it. Life will give you what you request of it. If you ask life for 10,000 shillings, you get 10,000 shillings. Then you feel like you're rich, but that's your standard, bro. You ask life for 1 million, it will give you 1 million. Life is rich and abundant. Life gives you what you ask as a standard. Now some of us are, you're thinking, oh, but I've been asking this. No, you ask with your standard. You don't ask with words. And how do you know it's a standard? Is what you make a must. That's your standard. That's what Tony is talking about here. The thing that you make this is an absolute must for me. And we always get our must. We always get our standards. What you make a must, you get. In fact, right now you are living the exact script of what you think is a must. You're living, look at your earnings per month. It's what you think is a must. It's a must for you to pay rent. You always pay rent. It's a must for you to pay school fees. You always pay school fees. It's a must for you to, take your family members to a healthcare. You do it because it's a must. It's not a must for someone else. It's not their standard. We always get our standard. And in these discussions, there are few pointers and points and pillars that I want you to notice here. And I've written them down for you so that you can get it clear. This is true, that standards determine the lower level, the lowest level acceptable to you. That's your standard. The rest we leave it to God. This is the least acceptable, the lowest acceptable, the lowest we can play. Stick to your standards. If you want a different year, stick to your standards. Honor your standard. Well, this is not acceptable for me. That's just a standard. It's honor. When you live a life of standard, you live a life of honor. Life does not give you what you want. Life gives you your standards. And so if you're in a relationship where, you are you're seeing things that you don't like and they're just happening, is because that is your standard. So don't blame someone else. Don't blame someone else. The moment you raise your standard, you will be out of the door. And the way to know someone has raised their standard is with their action. You cannot raise your standard with your mouth. There are so many people that talk is cheap. You talk, what big balloon, air kind of living. I'm talking about action. I'm talking about massive, massive action. And so look at your baseline, what you allow. The lower level of what is acceptable for you. That is your standard. Financially, we have a standard, financial standard. We have relationship standards. Now you know why you end up with the same kind of people, because life is giving you your standard. Life is giving you your standard. We get married to our standards. It's your standard. You get your standards. And although you may apply makeup and look like you're better than people in your circle, you are your circle. You are your standard. You did not choose them. Your standards make the choice. So you don't need to leave anyone. Raise your standard. They will float and fall down like dominoes, like they don't belong to your circle. You don't need to hate on anyone. Raise your standard. Once you raise your standard, your world, you live in a different world. So the lower, the baseline, whatever it is, you compromise, you accept. Find yourself, you accept okay people that have no mission, no purpose. The language they talk is just language of okay, fine. It's just fine. It's a comfort zone kind of standard. If that is your standard, that is what you're getting. Secondly, determine a standard that you are committed to raising. You have to be clear. You have to lay down the decision. You have to really decide. Decision means, no plan B. This is it. So decide and determine what is your standard. What is your level? What are you committed to? And there are different areas of your life. Mindset, what are you committed to? Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, when I was transitioning from full-time ministry, I was working as a reverend, as a pastor. And I got this call to help people outside of the church, to help professionals, organizations, people to raise their standards. I felt within my heart the need to better myself. And the first area that I raised my standard was in my mindset. And I made a commitment that I was going to read at least 10 books every month. And I bought books. These were books. I downloaded books, any book I could find on mind shift, personal development. I chewed them, I digested them, I took notes. My God, my life, everything was on these books. Some of my friends could not stand it. They're like, you're too booky. You're too booky. You're too personal. Don't you get tired of this stuff? So I ended up reading not just 10 books, but 450 books in a span of 2 years. 450 books. Look at this. I got this gadget here. Look at the way I've kept it so clean and, protected it with this. This is 13-year-old gadget. Full of books I've bought since I started this journey. And today we are talking of over 1,000 books here in this in this Kindle of 1,000 books. So I raised my standard. You know, I used to read a book and then I'll sleep as I'm reading. Let me tell you, this was a must for me because I'm moving into a new field of coaching. I cannot afford to be average. I studied people. I studied the best of the best, likes of Tony Robbins. I went into the core of the minds of giants. The blessings of a book is you can summarize someone's life in 2 weeks and digest it and pick the best nuggets from that. And I say this is my standard, is to interact with the best of the best. I looked around the country, there was none. There was no coaches then in Kenya. Today we have populated this country, East Africa, with coaches. We've trained coaches. Out of someone raising their standard, deciding that I'm not going to be ordinary, that I'm going to interact with first lane material. I'm going to interact with the cream of the cream. And I'm going to do some sort of digestion of this and look at how this applies in my context. 450 books down. And that's the moment I began to make meaning out of this life. I began to see where my place is in the leadership of the coaching industry in Africa. I began to see my calling, my God-given calling in this broader, bigger church without walls, the marketplace. And you know, today you can call me anytime, even in my sleep, and tell me, share on this subject. I'll find something to tell people that they'll take home, you know, something of value, because I raised my standard. And from that moment on, I keep on reading, studying, I keep on growing myself. I never, ever reach a place where I feel I have reached. Clients who've seen me 10 years ago, they meet me and they can't believe this is me. The person is different. I've changed. Whenever I meet people, I want to ingest the spirit of raising your standard, because if I can do that, we'll meet in the next 10 years and it's unbelievable the person you've become. If you can have the habit of raising your standard and that becomes your goal, to raise your standard, to progress forward, to become a better person every day. It doesn't happen by faith. Sorry. It happens by taking massive action. It begins by decision, making a decision. I decide this level of living, never, never, never. This is not my standard. You have to reach a point. Some of us are waiting for pain, for life to push you to the corner. Because I tell you, life sometime will get you by the neck and push you against the wall and demand of the story of your soul so you can live the life you are called to live. Some of us are waiting for that sickness to get hold of us so we can raise our standard and say, I'm not called for this kind of life. This is not my standard. Some of us are waiting for the divorce. You're waiting for people to leave you. You're waiting for the pain. Now, one of the things I pray and tell God is, Lord, that I may do all that I'm capable of doing, all that I have potential of doing, all that is revealed to me at this moment to do. If I can just do all that, so I don't have to be forced to do it, because nature has a way to digest out of its system unusable, useless elements. people that are just existing. People that are just there. People that are just looking for what's not working. People that don't want to take responsibility on their life. The worst thing as a human being, the worst corner to get into is that place where you're helpless, you're powerless, and life is happening to you. Things are happening to you. It's like, this world is like you're cursed. Even nothing is working. You try everything, nothing is working. Let me tell you, nothing is working externally because nothing is working internally. You're out of alignment. You need to get to that place of your soul and take 100% responsibility. I have the ability to decide the response of my life. That is what responsibility is about. Is knowing that I'm not blaming anyone. If you did me bad, okay, good for you, brother. If you escaped without a bruise, that's good. God bless you. But I'm not going to live the rest of my life upon your negative energy. I'll not allow the small guy interaction, tripping on my foot, hold me back, brother. My sister, I forgive you. I move on. Let my success become the revenge. I love that. Let me revenge with massive success by raising my standard. I'll raise it so high. I'll raise it so high you'll have no excuse but to see me. I'll raise it all up on the mountain and I'll shine the light so hard it will burn your eyes. How does that feel? That's what I'm talking about. This is what I talk about when I say decide, determine. If you don't determine, it will be determined for you. You'll be pushed. You'll be pushed by life. Sicknesses will serve. Sometimes even, the evil world serves the purposes of God sometimes. God can use a sickness to arouse you to raise your standard. Some of us will never stop eating junk. That's our standard. Everything that calls you by your third name, you just eat it, mutura, whatever. I saw a very interesting comment by one Pastor Nganga. He said, you guys, you're going out there to eat all the muturas, all the nganos, all the bad stuff. Then you come here and ask for my kidney. I'm not giving you kidney. I'm not giving you my kidney. I'm sorry. You have to raise the standard of your life. And I'm like, this guy actually, I don't like some of the things he said, but this one makes perfect sense. Some people go screw their life. Sorry for that, screw. Because that's what people do, is actually mess their life and then blame it on a generation, blame it on someone else, or take the responsibility on their family to help them. People really living bad life. It's just bad. Man, living bad life. Then when you're useless and almost dying, you're going to your kids begging them to help you and support you. You have an opportunity now, if you're still listening to me. Raise your standards. You don't want to be that guy that, your children are discussing who is going to help him. Please. I don't want to be that person. If I don't want to be that person, then I have to raise my standard. I have to organize my life in a way that my 40s make the greatest impact. My 30s make the great. I can't just talk about, I don't want this, I don't want that. No, it will want you. It will get you. because it's attracted to your standard. Let me be clear. Your standard is an internal magnet that attracts into your life the same level of relationships, of finances, of story, conversation. You have it on your standard. You stay on that level. It's your standard. Man, if you want to change your life, which I know you want, you didn't have listened to this far. Raise your standard. Get sick. Let me teach you a word that I want you to adopt. Disgust. Get disgusted with the level you are living right now. As long as you are in love with this level of smoking cigarette and drinking that stuff that is so cheap and taking your organs down and making you behave like you're crazy, blaming it on your father, that's a standard, my brother. That's a standard, my sister. If you want to live a different life, raise your standard. Make a decision. Decision is what decides destiny. Make a decision. Get sick, get disgusted. Look at this and saying, what's that? I don't want that. Get disgusted with a certain standard. Let it be disgust. That's a good word when it comes to change. Disgust. Disgust. All disgusted. What other people who find a joke may disgust you when you raise your standards. It begins to disgust you because you're not made for that standard. And it becomes easy for you to leave some relationships that are holding you to a lower standard. That's not my standard. Never compromise your standard, even if it's your mother involved. Because living your standard is living life by your terms. Now, the third one that I've written down as a summary of this conversation is see your new standard as a shift in your identity, in who you are, rather than a goal. Most of the time we never get our goals. But do you know we always get our standard? Like this year, you said you're going to achieve what? You say you're going to build that house, get that married, but you're going to get your standard. Kubali, accept. It's your standard. Acha kusema, don't blame God and say, it's not God's will. Maybe I'm waiting on God. No. You think God is unfair? It's your standard that is doing you. Deal with your standards. Raise your standard. Stop blaming people. Raise your standard. What is your standard? Once you shift your standard, you raise your standard, it will shift your identity. You begin to show up as a different person. You don't need to work on change. You just need to raise your standard and change happens in your world. You just realize, oh my God, how did I attract all these beautiful relationships around me? How did I get here? How we are having such, a deep conversation with these guys. How did I get here? How did I build this family? Don't allow even your blood people that are in your blood family hold you back. It doesn't matter. Divorce them. Let them go. Once you raise your standard, you realize you don't even, there's no conversation. Because every time they talk, they're talking things that you left long time ago. In the metaphoric Egypt, you moved on. You're going to the promised land. Don't look back. You'll be turned into a pillar of salt. Raise your standard. It's a shift. Raising your standard will be the most important factor that will actually work in turning your life around. Sorry, I raised my standard. And you realize I don't reply some text, sorry, I raised my standard. When you realize I don't reply them the way I used to, sorry, I raised my standard. The mteja unayetafuta hapatikani. The mobile subscriber is not reachable on that network because I raised my standard. You raise your standard, you begin to speak a certain way. You begin to have certain conversation. You begin to, interact with certain kind of people. You raise your fee and you raise your value. Whatever it is that you deliver, you raise your value. One of my commitment to my clients is always to over-deliver. I want to be on record as serving you so much more than you can ever pay me. That's a standard. It's a standard. My standard in terms of relationship, I would better be alone in a corner somewhere than be surrounded by people pleasers or people that I need to please. I advocate only for healthy relationships. Ones where we are feeding into each other. One where it's not just take. No. I don't play that game. I don't grow up and call me. Yeah, man. That's my standard. What's yours? Don't talk about my standard. It's mine. Because I live life by my terms. So you decide what is your standard. What is your standard? I'd like to know. What is the different areas of life where you must raise your standard? Key areas of my life where I've raised my standard and gotten results, massive results. Number 1 was my mindset. Number 2 was my health. Very key. Those 2 key. Number 3 was my spirituality. Breaking free from religion and religiosity and becoming one with God. Realizing the awareness of the Christ consciousness within me. That I'm not living to please anyone, and I'm not, in God because of fear of hell, but because of love of God in me. A standard. Life is too short to live it for someone else or for a party, a religion, an organization. It is here to be lived by our terms, so that by the time we breathe our last, we are proud of ourselves. What a beautiful life. This life is beautiful, but only when you decide to see the beauty in it and raise your standard to live in that place of beauty. And you realize, this life is beautiful. It's a gift. I raise the standard of what I eat, when I eat, and how I exercise. That my health, very key. No compromise. Which 3 areas of your life must you raise your standard so you can become the person you are born to be? And if you need a clarity session, I tell you what, I want to serve you. And so I'll give it to you as a gift. Since you've come to this level, you've listened to this message up to this level, I'll give you a clarity session. And if you're one of my former clients, I can give you a review session. So you book, there's a link below. You can book a review or clarity session, and I'll see you at Breakthrough with Jeff. This is the place we live life with 0 limits. God bless you. Stay on fire. And if you want to change your life, remember Tony Robbins said, you have to raise your standard today. Goodbye.